Hello, everyone. Anika Apple here. Thank you for joining me for the Anika Apple Podcast live. We're doing something new and shifting the weekly podcast to a live podcast. So, a little bit of a new experience for us. So, join me on the journey. Grateful that you would be here. And for those of you listening to the replay, thank you so much for listening. So today is February 1st, and we are actually going to kick off the month with the divine guidance for February. And so I'm excited to share the messages that have come forward today. For those of you who it's your first time joining me for the podcast, please make sure that you subscribe. You definitely will want to make sure that you don't miss an episode as we work to help you integrate all of the parts of you so that you can live a remarkable life. Our podcast is really focused on helping you to understand the divine guidance that God gives, and then how to live in integrated way. So if you think about the areas of marketplace and community, leadership, and healing, those are the other the other three topics that we rotate, with the divine guidance being the fourth for each month. And so every 4 weeks we have a cycle of those. And what I love about this is that it is a place that you can go to hear perspectives about those respective areas and how you bring the core of who you are, your spiritual center, into place. So, in leadership, last week, as an example, I talked about personal leadership and how important it is to really have a grounding in what it means to be solid in your personal leadership. And quite frankly, it's not just about whether or not you know how to lead, but it is about your being able to discern whether or not the people who are leading around you or leading you in, actual roles where you might be reporting to them, etc., whether or not they are in alignment with where you are trying to go. Because in the season that we are in, if you were just simply following people and you've not used your discernment, it can be so detrimental. And what I know, what I've seen and experienced is that when you are following others without continuously checking in with the divine, you can miss the shifts that are happening within someone. So, in one of the other roles that I have, the Healing Crusade, I do a lot of work on helping people to go into introspection and to identify what's happening on the inside of them. And in short, we often don't realize what the unhealed conditions that we're navigating leave us open to. So, what vulnerabilities are there that can be places for us to react and respond in a way that comes from the traumas and experiences of the past? And in many ways, those things can show up with behaviors and choices and decisions that are not in alignment with what our highest self would say, not what the creator designed for us. And so that's a part of what it's really at the heart of why I do this podcast. But the divine guidance for those who are new, just want to tee this up for you. One of the things that is most important, and I say it every single episode, every single divine guidance, is that anything that I or anyone else shares that delivers a prophetic word to you should always be taken back to God. You've got to go back and understand how to apply it to your life and what it means for you. And I would encourage you to test the spirit with which the message is delivered with God. So, those are the kinds of questions that you would ask. So, that said, I'm going to get into the divine guidance for the month of February, as God gives me the themes for each month. They are themes that are important for us to be aware of in this month. It does not always mean that the things that are shared are happening in the immediate term. So if you will take the perspective that part of what my prophetic voice is here to do is to help prepare people. That's one of the things that I have been called to do. And so this is a place of preparation. And so understanding and having the moment to digest in your system what is to come and ways in which to prepare is a benefit of listening to and understanding what the divine guidance is. We are grounded today in Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 4, as the beginning of this. That whole chapter is actually a chapter related and connected to the divine guidance that comes forth for today. But I'm going to start there because that is the instruction that God gave me. And so, Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 4, reading out of the NIV, for those of you that would like to follow along, hear the word of the Lord, you descendants of Jacob, and all you clans of Israel. This is what the Lord says. What fault did your ancestors find in me, that they strayed so far from me? They followed worthless idols and became worthless themselves. They did not ask, where is the Lord who brought us up out of Egypt and led us through the barren wilderness, through the land of deserts and ravines, a land of drought and utter darkness, a land where no one travels and no one lives. I brought you into a fertile land to eat its fruit and rich produce, but you came and defiled my land and made my inheritance detestable. The priests did not ask, where is the Lord? Those who deal with the law did not know me. The leaders rebelled against me, and the prophets prophesied by Baal, following worthless idols. So, and then you can pick up at chapter 9. I ended at verse 8. Sorry, not chapter, but verse 8. I read verses 4 through 8, and you can pick up at verse 9 in chapter 2 of the book of Jeremiah if you would like to read the rest. So, if we pause for a moment, what we are saying here is that if you look at what God had created, the space, the protection, the opportunity that was available, all of what God was offering to their children as their creator to their children was available to all. However, even with all of the protections and the provisions that God gave, people still were busy doing their own thing. They still decided not to follow and do what God was calling them to do. And so it's interesting. I want to go back to verse 4 for just a moment. It starts off with, hear the word of the Lord, as if we have not heard it already. And I think that is such a salient point because we do know already that this book that that I'm reading from has been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. There's a lot of time that we think that things are so nuanced that they cannot be applicable. But the truth is, we've known that the time that we are in would come. It was written. And we've known that the shifts that are about to happen would come. And quite frankly, even a lot of the events that we are seeing happen in the world where, there's some shock and awe, people knew, and there are people who are orchestrating some of the things that are happening. There is the one thing that I would say to you is that this is a time to ensure that you are looking with fresh eyes and not just based on the perspectives of what you've had in the past. It is so important to be grounded in truth and not fooled by what looks shiny, new, and clean. This is not a time that you've been in before, yet it was written about, yet it has been said. And so you can draw yourself back to what are the words that God has been saying to you in your personal life, in your prayer time? What are the words that have been said that you've taken back to God in prayer? What are the things that you are aware of that perhaps you might be pushing away because you have not grounded yourself in the truth that lives on the inside of you, your intuitiveness? but all of those resources are there for you. So I would behoove you to make it a point to take the message back to God and to really sit with it and understand where you are in your journey and what it is that you need in order to be able to be grounded in the time that is to come. If you want to know a little bit more about what to expect in 2024, I encourage you to go back to the divine guidance for the month of January and a couple of highlight months last year, August and September. They have all been so salient and on point, but those in particular talk a lot about what is to come, and so those are great places to go to. So divine guidance is for everyone, but I do base everything on the Bible. So I read the Bible, and God speaks to me through the Bible, and so that is where I base the message and ground us as I go into this today. So there's 4 themes for the month of February. The first one is the scales are tipping. And in this theme, there's some excitement for so many of you. There should be some excitement for so many of you, really for all of us. But what it means very specifically is that the tides are turning, they're changing. Things are changing direction. And so if you think about, as a matter of fact, I have pull my Lady Justice statue down for a second. So the scales, right? So you know how the scales work. When there is something heavy on one side, it pulls up the other. And there is the intention of Lady Justice being blindfolded is because justice is supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be what's truly the right thing, right? Not just, weighing things from a subjective place, but to be truly objective. And the scales in the world have been very heavily leaning on evil, which we see it in here. It's been leaning on greed. It's been driven by pride and ego. And so it looks like if we were to imagine ourselves sitting at a sporting event looking at the scoreboard, it looks like this might be a landslide. It looks like it might be one of those that might have to be called early because there's so much that's happening in the world. And for the ground that it looks like good has been taking on, light has been taking on, for that ground, it looks like there's some movement. There's definitely signs of life. If it was basketball, it's like they're scoring a couple 3-pointers even, maybe at the half, things are looking like maybe there's a chance of a comeback, but you come out of that third quarter and it's like, okay, I don't know. Looks like they're trying to run away with this one. At the end of the day, we already know who wins. And that is such a blessing. But it doesn't mean that it's not a fight to get back on top. And what's beautiful is God's insertion in things where people have truly been in a place of surrender. You see, if you heard the message back in the summer, I talked about the tunnel. And the tunnel was a place of surrender for so many people of like, I really don't know. I can't even see anything. It's dark. I don't know where it is that I'm going, but I just know that I'm following God. I'm following my creator. I just know that. And in following the creator, you are on a path that God is taking you down somewhere that's going to require you to do some things. It's going to require some pivots and some other things that you're going to sacrifice and perhaps some suffering and challenge and all of those things. But it will all turn around for the good. It will all be able to be used for what's good because that's God's promise to us. So as you're on that journey, it may look like it was dark for a moment, but now you are seeing light. And the thing about it is, I'm seeing this even now as I share this with you. It's like for those who chose light, you're coming out of the tunnel and you see the light. And what you don't know is that others are still sitting in the darkness. And so how is it possible that at the same time there could be light and darkness happening, right? But indeed it is. That is what is this time that we're in for this year, for next year, for as long as required until things have come to a place where God's kingdom is here on earth. And so when the scales are tipping, this is a good thing because the heaviness has been on darkness. And what God has assured us is that there are leaps and bounds that are going to happen in change. They have already happened, but we are going to see them. We're going to see the manifestation of the move of God in such a way that it looks like it's leaps and bounds. It's just so big. There's just so much change and transformation coming. So the first thing for you to know is that the scales are indeed tipping. And with that, it means that there are people who God has called who have to be standing strong in the truth of who they are in order for those scales to continue to get heavier on the side of good. It also means that there are some things that are going to have to be eliminated on the side of darkness. And that will be something that we'll talk about significantly in the month of March. The next one, the next theme, and I love this. What God said is the flowers are in bloom. It's winter, but you starved in summer and in fall. So the flowers in bloom in winter, like it's February 1st. What are we talking about here? Sometimes you plant and sow into the places where you are supposed to, and it looks like there is no harvest, right? So the starving in summer and in fall, those are the times where you would expect to see that early harvest coming, right? And then the full harvest coming in fall. It's like, well, I planted and I nurtured and I did all of these things. And what happened? And perhaps you're sitting in this space like, but I mean, I've been waiting. And for sure, I can appreciate this particular theme myself. In winter, you don't expect to have a bountiful harvest, right? It's cold and most of the crops are already gone, and the soil is getting replenished. It'll be ready to be tilled and all of that stuff so that the planting can happen again for in the spring for the harvest to come in the fall. But what God is telling us is the flowers are in bloom right now. On February 1st, the flowers are in bloom. And to recognize, because you would be surprised to walk out to your garden and all of a sudden see flowers blooming everywhere, right? Because that's not what happens. And sometimes when things are unusual for us, we start to explain it away to say, like, oh, that can't possibly be, something must be wrong, like all of that stuff. And God is saying, I need you to know and understand. You need to go look at the garden. You need to keep looking at the garden, keep walking the garden. You should be walking out to the garden expecting something to grow, because the flowers are in bloom now. And you're like, but why would that be? And I'm not prepared to do something with all these flowers in the winter. And if it's coming up right now, isn't it going to die and freeze? No, because who else could have flowers growing in the winter? Flowers that typically grow in our fall and summer season. Who else but God? How else does that happen? Now, understand, I'm speaking metaphorically, right? So, yes, I know that there are some flowers that bloom in winter. That's not what we're talking about. The point is that your journey, where it looks like the things that you planted and were expecting, and perhaps you've been in a place of dismay or frustration, perhaps You've been so sad. Perhaps you've even been contemplating not even putting any more seed in the ground this year because you're so frustrated about what didn't happen before. But God says, look again and see that the flowers are starting to bloom, that the things are starting to come up. And I wanted to wait until the winter time for the flowers to come up so that you would know that this is by my hand and not someone else. There's nothing about winter that says it should be full of fresh harvest. There's nothing about it in the natural, in our natural sense of the way the ecosystem of our seasons work. We would not expect that yet. When God steps in, when the divine is rolling through, the miracles happen when you least expect it. And so you're hearing this message so that you know you need to posture yourself in a place of expectation. So, what I call upon from you right now is that if you have been worried, if you have been struggling, if you have been feeling complacent about what you've planted and whether or not God was going to perform, check that thing right now. This is the moment for you to check it and to say to yourself, all right, maybe I have been dismayed, but I still believe you. I still believe God. I still believe your promises. It's time for you to bring yourself back to that because that posture is required for you to see the flowers in bloom. And it is possible for the one who is questioning that in this moment as you're watching this, it is possible for the flowers to be in bloom and for you to not see them because your posture is not right. So understand this is about you believing in possibilities, standing on the promises of God. Remember what I read earlier in the scripture as the divine's walking us through these lush places with so much to offer. Do we go back? Do we allow our eyes to be averted back to the things of the world? Or do we stand strong in what God has been saying? And listen, I know it's not easy. But if you pause for a second and ask yourself, what has always come through for you? What has never failed you? I know you can't answer that as people or your work or things of the world, the systems, because that just simply wouldn't be true. It always comes back to our Creator. It's the only place, the only one who never fails. So just remember that as the harvest comes in, this is the second part, as the harvest comes in, that this is a bountiful harvest and it is yours and you deserve it. Let me say it again. You deserve it. Because remember that you starved in summer and in fall. And what you need to know is that in so many cases, God protected your harvest by having it come in winter. Because the people that you kept company with in the summer and in the fall desired what is rightfully yours. And God will not stand for that. This turning, the scales tipping, the turning of the tides, the changes and shifts that are happening are about you moving into position as you are intended to be. And for so many of you, you are called forward to bring light. And it's time for you to step into the truth of who you are and to operate from your divinity. So this is the moment that you're called to. Okay, the next theme, our third theme, is around caution and delays. So, and it really it ties dovetails really nicely into what I talked about around the flowers being in bloom. And so what the message is for us is to really take the angst out by expecting delays. And there's something about our um mindset where we are just so often like delays have the ability to take people to such a place. It's like I was expecting it and whatever, right? You can even use the example of someone on their way to a meeting, right? They've got to get there, they have exactly the right amount of time, maybe a little bit of wiggle room because you like to be on time or whatever, and you hit a traffic accident and you end up blowing your whole timetable up. If you usually gave yourself 5 minutes grace, this is a season where you need 30. Because just as I was just saying a moment ago about the flowers being in bloom and people who you kept court with in season, this time the continued delays that you experience are going to be for protection. And the protection will not always be obvious about what it was from. So sometimes the delays are going to be from things that you could not possibly have known was going to happen, but God kept you from it. Imagine, like if I had left 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later and I would have been in an accident, right? Because I ended up just ahead of whatever happened, a couple of cars behind me, and we bind that up. um but as that example, right, it's like the timing was so specific to make sure that I was not in that place. So you could be in the situation where you're running late, and then because you're running late, it kept you from being in the midst of that accident, or perhaps something kept telling you to go early and you went early. But either way, the way that you moved kept you away from what could have been. The delays that we experience in this season are going to be beneficial when we follow in direct obedience to God. When we do what God is saying, they will be protective for us. The delays. The caution part of this is that we have to posture ourselves and create this mindset where we understand, where we are accepting of things that we truly cannot change. We're accepting of things that seem like they're not in alignment with what we have been expecting or asking for. But we must be able to receive that because we don't know what is about to happen. And when I say we don't know, that we prophesy in part. So there's a lot that I do understand about the time that we're in and what is to come. There's a lot more than I care to know. But sometimes I do care to know it, to be clear. But sometimes there are things where if we would leave it to our own ability, our own timing, our own thought, our own whatever, we would put ourselves right in the middle of harm's way because we simply don't know. So, with the opportunity that is afforded to us is to rest and trust what the divine is telling us. So, for those of you who may say, I believe in something greater, and I don't really call that God, I don't really know what that is. Okay, no problem. Understand that on the inside of you is a connection to your creator. You can call it your intuition, the divinity within, whatever it is, that whatever your name is for it. it is time for us to be in alignment with that thing. And in order for you to really connect to your intuitiveness, it's a relationship, right? Just like the relationship that you create with the creator. And what I would submit to you, I know, understand that people may have different belief systems, but it's this relationship with the creator, with what is broader, with the divine, that helps you to understand and know the voice that sits on the inside of you and be able to tell that thing that's different from when it's pride and ego. So in this time, we have to learn how to posture ourselves. And we are going to do that by seeking the voice of God, by staying in God's presence, by understanding what God is telling us about the time, the season, the moment that we're in. And if you call that, something else, then understand it to be your intuitiveness. But you've got to be connected with that thing, because that is going to serve as a compass for you. Blessings, Pastor. That's going to serve as a compass for you. So that is incredibly important in the time up ahead. So caution and delays. So start working on your patience if you haven't already, because these delays and cautions, and I would encourage you, I am someone who believes very deeply in affirmations, right? So have your affirmation ready. When I'm delayed, it doesn't mean I'm denied. This moment of test or trial is an opportunity for me to practice my patience. Whatever it is that you need to do to keep yourself postured in a place where you are trusting, you need to do that, because it's important to not lose hope and not take your eyes off of God, because we are going to have caution and delays. And I'm telling you, in what I have seen in the time up ahead, we will be grateful for them, because some of those moments will keep us out of harm's way for things that we couldn't even imagine. It's one thing if you can put your mind around what a possibility is, right? So for example, one of the things that God was showing me, it was interesting. It's like there are these trucks and cars, and they're on it's a building, building line street. Either side has a lot of buildings, and they're like skyscrapers. It looks like it could be a street downtown, in any big city, but I always think about New York City because I think it's the greatest city in the world. But there's this truck that pulls out and kind of pulls up on top of a car. And then in what was being shown to me, it starts to move backwards. So it's like moving away from the vantage point where I'm watching this scene happen. And it just starts being pulled back, and it looks like it's being sucked into a hole. It's really interesting. And God showed it to me just as I was sitting in preparation to come on to this message. So I can't say that I have a lot of understanding yet about what it all means. I have to sit with God for a while longer before I would try to articulate what it means. My point to you is, if we were walking down a street together and we saw a van pull back, get itself on top of a car and start to move backwards, we would be like, what the heck just happened? Right? There are things to come that we are going to see and experience that we couldn't even imagine, we couldn't fathom. And so if we were watching that and it looks like it's being sucked back into something, we would be like, we would not know what to do. And because so much of what is ahead will be things that we cannot anticipate in the way that we are used to, because our mind that makes sense of everything doesn't have the capacity to imagine everything that is possible, which is why you have to seek after God. So we have to posture ourselves in a place where we just get comfortable knowing, if I don't know all the details and I can't see it all, it's still okay. It doesn't mean that God's promises have changed. It just means I have to be patient, because this season, there's something not right in this very moment for the thing that I have been expecting to come to show up. Now, let me pause for a second. So the scales are tipping in our favor. There is more weight moving to light. More people are coming forward. They're stepping into what it is that they've been called to do. There is more light than there has been, and there's more light to come. So this is a good thing, right? The flowers blooming in the winter, that is a phenomenal thing, because for those of us that starved in summer and in fall, when we were expecting a bountiful harvest and it came in pieces, and perhaps we never had the fulfillment of what it was, it's on its way, right? So these are good things. We get to caution and delay. And I don't want you to spend a moment like, oh my gosh, things are going to be delayed. No, 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 no. If you planted and you're doing the right thing, then there's a harvest for you in winter. So caution and delay is talking about what's happening now. I look at this part of the message for myself like, this is a great thing, because I managed to get out of summer and last fall. I'm already in February 2024. So what happened is past. But if you mean I was supposed to get some things back then and they didn't come, that means they're coming now. So I'm going to get what I need now. And what's delayed is maybe what was originally planned for now. I'm cool. Give me what was coming. Does that make sense? So this doesn't mean that you are going to be without in this season, but it does mean that you have to be prepared and accepting of the delays, because what will happen if you get angry and frustrated about delays that are happening, about things in the now, is you're going to put yourself you're going to pull yourself out of the posture that you need to be in to receive in the season that God has taken us into. And for those of you that are new to the divine guidance, a lot of what I talked about last year was how we get to this place of living the abundant life that God has for us. I call it a remarkable life. And it is about the posture of our heart and our relationship with God, our relationship with the divine. When those things are in alignment, what we can experience and have is mind blowing. But we have to do the things that we are called to do. We have to walk in obedience. We have to demonstrate love for one another. And part of love is being patient. It just simply is. Grace requires patience. Think about the grace that God gives us. God is definitely being patient with me, right? And that's the same thing it takes for us to give it to other people. Last theme, and then I will wrap up. The last theme is around transformation. And what God was sharing with me, this transformation is as if you are seeing people who look like chameleons. This is so cool. God said, tell them that the people who look like chameleons, they are mine. They are the people that I have called. So these chameleons are going to do something really cool. God said they're going to transform right in front of your eyes. So it's like you're looking at them in one moment, and all of a sudden you turn around and all of a sudden it's like, boom, it's something different. It's like you saw the manifestation of what God has been doing in the secret closets with them for so long. It's going to happen right in front of you. It's going to be right there. You're going to see it and experience it. And this is an incredible thing. And so for those of you who have been in your cave seasons, who have been working away with God, who have been waiting for this moment, be encouraged. This message has so much encouragement. If you posture yourself in the way that you are supposed to, in the way that God has called you to, in the instruction that you have been given to receive that which already has your name on it. Not getting your name put on it. It's already called for you. It's already a part of the plan. Go back into Jeremiah 2. It's already a part. God already did this. And so in the moments that are up ahead, God is saying you're going to begin to see these chameleons, these people who seemingly change right in front of your face. I want to differentiate that between when people use the word chameleon and they're basically like, oh, this person can change, like shapeshift, like they can change their form in any place. Like, this is not that. God's saying, I'm going to transform them right in front of your eyes. But we don't use a butterfly for this example, right? Because the metamorphosis, it takes a long time for that to happen. This is different because it's going to be swift. The transformation is like, I'm looking at Anika now, and then I look at Anika, I blink, and I look at her again, and oh my gosh, wow, what happened? How did God do that? And that is how you will know. because God is taking those that they have called and transforming them in front of your eyes. This is a different way of seeing things happen. The worldly way is very much that you disappear far off and no one has heard or seen from you. And then all of a sudden you come back and it's like, oh, well, when did that happen? You'll know when it happened because you're going to see it. Because what God is so clear about is that for those who he has called and who have answered and who have done the work in public and secret, every way that God has called them to, God is going to demonstrate that their hand is upon them. Those children have God's hand upon them. And that is pretty incredible and inspiring and encouraging, all of the things. And God said that the seeming transformation right in front of us should be an indicator to us that those we see transforming know God's voice, that they know God's voice, that they hearken to God's voice, and that they're doing the things that God has called them to do. For too long of a time, it's been really difficult to tell the difference between those who truly are constantly seeking after God and those who use God's name. And that is going to change. You're going to be able to see the difference. One of the things that God shared with me a few months ago is that, well, God has been saying about that the words matter for a really long time. I always say it's always about the words, and it's so true. But what God is going to be demonstrating, what God is going to put on pure display for people, and people, even those who are not as closely connected and following and paying attention to things like that, it's going to become so pronounced that you recognize when you see the same kind of words coming from people like threads. And what God is saying is that even as I say this in this message, as this message carries out, that there will be some who think to themselves, oh, this is how I keep myself undercover. I got to make sure that I look at what she says and what he says and what they say and kind of say the same thing. It's not going to work. So let me just tell you right now, don't spend your time on that. Because the way God is doing it, it will be so authentic and so clear and so immediate. The moment will be past by the time you try to take what someone else has been given by God and to make it seem as if it's your own. The moment will be gone. So don't even waste your time. Any who are intending to try and masquerade as if they are in this moment truly called and hearing from God. There's a protection around the word that God has been given to God's prophets. And it is different than what has existed in last season. And so just know that those who are dishonoring God's name, there will have to be some kind of reconciliation. And that's not for us to determine. That is about the individuals and God. See, each person is personally accountable to God for their choices and decisions. All of us need to spend less time looking at what other people are doing and how they are moving, and more on the posture that we're in. What is the purity of our heart? Are our hearts far from God? Or are we constantly seeking God and looking, having an attitude of repentance and surrender? Are we looking to have more of God's divine guidance in our life? Are we looking to have more of God's presence? Are we reading more of God's word? And you can apply this to the different ways that you honor the creator, the divine, that you center yourself in your spirituality. You can connect it to however it is that you see and understand God today. What I know and understand is that our understanding, I said understand like 97 times right there, but our understanding of God is going to continue to evolve. And for a long time, it has been very more one-dimensional than what is really true, the true essence of God. And that somehow will become more readily understandable, digestible by people than what it ever has been in the past. And that's pretty exciting because God is so vast, so massive. And quite frankly, we have in our not knowing, not really understanding, we've tried to create, when the word says lead not on your own understanding. And that's exactly what we've tried to do, to create some simplicity around how we know and understand God. And it was never for us to do that. And so that has to be reconciled as well, which is great because it means you'll get to learn more about your creator, more about the divine. So that is it for the divine guidance. I hope that this message was clear for you and that you will take the key points that that really resonated with you back into prayer, back into your meditation time and your solitude, your quiet time. Again, the scriptural reference today was Jeremiah chapter 2, starting at verse 4. And I believe I read through verse 8. I do encourage you to read the chapter. For those of you who read the Bible, definitely encourage you to do that. And more than anything, please make it a practice to spend time with God, with your creator, listening, talking to, connecting with your inner self, your higher power, however it is you describe it. We have our intuitiveness, our gifting, however you choose to describe it, we have it because the creator placed it on the inside of us. And it is there to be a compass for us, not the kind of compass that you see in the world that points at who is successful doing XYZ. Our lives are supposed to be run on principles, and those principles are related to what our creator desired for us, which is the sentiment that you hear in the scripture that I shared. That is, I believe, really the core point of why that particular scripture. And so when we ground ourselves in the understanding of who the creator is, then we can live a most remarkable life, even in times of angst and uncertainty, like the direction in which we head. So I thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the Anika Apple Podcast. And let me know what you thought of about the podcast being live compared to recorded. For those of you who are watching the replay, you're probably like, it's all the same. But I'd love to hear your perspective over the weeks as we start to do it live. And and don't forget to subscribe and share the divine guidance. And if there's anything of interest that you would like to share as you go back and sit with God, please make sure you come back and share it in the comments. All right, everyone, as always, peace and blessings. So before I go, for those of you that heard the episode last week where I talked about the Healing Crusade, we have decided that we are going to extend the free trial period through the end of February. So you can still come on and join and experience 2 free weeks so that you can get acclimated with the different challenges and what the experience is like in the Healing Crusade. So you can find out more information about the Healing Crusade at anikaapple.com. And if you just tab over to the Healing Crusade page, all of the information is there. You also can find me at the Anika Apple across social media and on the Anika Apple channel on YouTube. As always, peace and blessings.